All right, we are here today with Reverend Emily Badgett, who is the assistant to the rector at Good Shepherd. Welcome, Emily, and thank you for being with us. I think this will be a very inspirational interview with you. You're fairly newly ordained, just in last December, and I wanted to start with asking how it is you chose to dedicate your life to being a priest.
My family will tell you it was when I was like 7 years old, and a family friend and a pseudo godmother of mine, Susan Yelton, would say it was when she was 7 years old, and we were in the church kitchen, and she was telling me that she either wanted to be a priest, a lawyer, or a teacher, in that order. I probably said those things. I don't disagree, but I probably didn't know what any of those jobs meant when I was 7 years old. But I think the common theme is that I wanted to be with people and helping people. And I grew up in such a loving Episcopal church that enveloped my family and myself in so much love all of the time, in moments of great joy, in moments of great grief. They were just there. It was as simple as just being present. Susan also, my uncle died when I was in high school, and she got this. I remember just seeing it at my uncle's funeral. We're sitting in the parking lot waiting for it to start, and then Susan rolls up in this SUV full of church people from my church in North Carolina, and it was just like such a moment of like, this is going to be a hard day, but we have these people that love us. And it was that kind of stayed with me. And so when I was in college and discerning what I wanted to do with my life, I got really involved in nonprofit work. I did a lot of different jobs in nonprofits, and I loved it, but something always felt missing. And the more and more I started working in secular nonprofits, and then I worked in some Christian nonprofits. I did some mission abroad, and I loved all of it, but there was still something that was like not clicking for me. And there was this moment in college when I was running to and from, because I did everything, and I was a busy person. I loved to be busy. And I had run to the dining hall, grabbed myself a burrito, and I was going to eat the burrito right before this lecture that I was really excited for. So I'm sitting in the little auditorium, eating my burrito, and a friend of mine introduces her other friend that I, to this day, cannot remember her name. And she goes, "This is Emily from All Saints Concord," which is the church I grew up in. And this person's immediate response was, "Do you know Jennifer Cobb?" And I said, "Yes." For background, Jennifer Cobb was one of my youth leaders when I was growing up, and also died around when I was 15 years old. And it was a big moment in my life, and I hadn't thought about her in a couple years just because I was in college, I was in a new state, like all of those things. And so right before this lecture, where I'm like in between 10 different things, we're sitting there talking about this person that we share that we love. And then we go through the lecture, and then afterwards we're chit-chatting again about Jennifer. And the last words that this woman says to me were, "Jennifer was always denying her call to ministry," and walks away. For the life of me, can't remember her name. I remember her face and all of that in the content of the conversation. And I was like, why did she leave that with me is the last thing that she said to me. And so I decided, there's lots of other things going on in my life, and I was like, when I go on spring break, I'm going to have lunch with my rector, and we're going to sit, and I'm going to tell her about what I've been thinking about and praying about and all of these pieces. And I didn't give her any background of why we're having lunch. I was like, we're just going to go have lunch and check up. And I go, spring break, I go into her office, and like, where are we going to lunch? And she goes, sit down. We have business to talk about. And I said, what business do we have to talk? Like, I'm here to have lunch. Like, this is the business that I thought we were doing. And she goes, the bishop and I have been talking about you starting discernment virtually since I was in a different state at the time, and he's okay for that to happen. And I was like, I scheduled this lunch to talk to you about that, and you already were working without telling me about making it happen so that it can happen. And I was just like, oh, okay. And there was a lot of clarity in that moment of like, I think everyone has a call in life. Not everyone is called to be ordained, but I've watched it happen with friends and people that I work with, that like when they find the thing that God has made them to be, there's just this peace. And that's when I started discernment, what came for me. Like all of the anxiety of what's next, or what am I supposed to do in this world, kind of just stopped, because I had found the clarity. And there's a moment even in this conversation where my rector looks at me and she goes, "A priest does less." And I'm like, "What do you mean? You do like every, like you're doing a lot." And she goes, "I get to do a lot, but I get to empower people in a lot of my special interests that I don't have time for." And so for me, and I heard that and I was like, "Oh, well, my love for children over here, my love for education over here, my love for mission can all be done within the realm of being a priest, but I don't have to like be all in on all of things. I can help empower and equip people to do that together. And I get to benefit from learning from them and growing with them and all of those pieces." And it's just that piece of my job of being a connector is so wonderful, because I think about things and I pray about different things happening, but then someone comes into my life and I'm like, that's the right person. And like they can do things much more than I could ever dream or imagine, because they were called to do that thing. And I was called to walk alongside them.
So when you were thinking about becoming a priest, as I understand it, you had no idea that you wanted to serve in a parish. You wanted to do other things. What was that journey, and how did you end up being a parish priest?
Yeah. Early on in my discernment process, I looked at my rector and I said, "I love what you do, but I don't want to do what you do. Like, I want to do something creative and fun and different and not done before." Um, and I worked at a Episcopal church that is people that live on the streets of Atlanta. Our altar is a plastic table. There's no kind of church building. And I loved that kind of work. And we literally on Tuesdays had a foot clinic where we washed the feet of people that live on the street. So it really takes Monday, Thursday to a whole new level when you're doing that. And then I worked at a church that was people that were on the mental and physical disability spectrum, surrounded by art, and all of these creative and different things. And then before both of those, or in between both of those experiences, I was a hospital chaplain during the pandemic, kind of by accident. I was working, and my bishop was like, "I would like you to do a year of clinical pastoral education," which is a formal training program for chaplains and parish leaders, and just a kind of a residency of different sorts. And so I did that, started applying in January of 2020, not knowing what the rest of the year would come, and I got an offer and started working in May. And from May to August of 2021 is when I was a hospital chaplain, and everything I knew about ministry shifted. And the acuity of what I was experiencing was incredible. That like I got to be with these people in these moments of real like shifts in their lives. Some were tragedies, some were great joys. The cancer was completely gone. Some were just these real intimate moments. And I loved it. I worked 12, 24-hour shifts on call, like all of those things. But I realized in my heart of hearts, I couldn't sustain this kind of ministry. I was grateful to be doing it in my hometown. So I had my family nearby and my church community that surrounded me and supported me in a really difficult time. I couldn't see my family in person without being masked, because I was going in and out of COVID patient rooms. Like, it was a very isolating time. And I got to be creative and fun and do all of those things, but it wasn't what I knew I could be seeing myself doing for a long time. And it wasn't until I went to seminary, and in my first year of seminary, my best friend, my oldest best friend, we were best friends since we were 5 years old, died by suicide in my January of my first year of seminary. And the first year of seminary, for a lot of places, you are learning Hebrew scriptures. And at the time in that class, we were reading Jonah. And I just got a new appreciation for Jonah and his story. And this new church that I was working at just a very normal Episcopal church, nothing special, or um, just surrounded me in so much love. And I had only been there less than 6 months. And I watched how this community supported me. And then my community in North Carolina, again, a normal, typical Episcopal church, in all the ways that I was able to process my grief and be held. And there's this moment when I'm like kind of in my feelings, and my best friend Caleb at the time, who's also friends with Owen, and I'm like lamenting to him that like, you have your partner, Maria, our other friend, has her husband, and I'm like, I don't have, like, I'm a single woman in a new city, and I'm doing this weird thing for school. And he kind of metaphorically slaps me in the face. And again, he's a computer programmer, works from home. He goes, you have this whole church community thing that I don't have. Like, I don't remember the last time I saw a baby. I don't remember the last time I saw someone my grandparents' age that weren't my grandparents. And you have this community that knows how to handle grief and like has systems and services and ways to deal with it that like I don't have, even though I have my person. And I was like, oh, like that's my whole story of grief has been such a part of my story, whether it's personally or professionally. And the venue to work with that is the local church, because that's where you're having your funerals. That's where you're having your weekly Sunday services, where you're kind of going back and forth. And so when I started looking for jobs, I was like, I think I'm going to look for jobs in parish ministry, because I have the flexibility and the time to do these creative and fun things, but also I get this structure to support people in the chaos and messiness of life. And when I started this process, I was like, life is chaotic and messy, and let's make it even more chaotic and messy and add some fun to it. But then I got a gift from God that the church is the structure that helps us make sense of this messy world we live in.
What does it actually mean to you to be an Episcopalian?
That's a great question. I love talking about the Episcopal Church because I think there's like the rep that it gets in like the popular media around like King Henry VIII and all of those things, but then also like the way that it gets attached to power and privilege in the United States. And for me, being an Episcopalian is having some structure. So some people will call it liturgy, and having kind of the same, when you walk into an Episcopal church, you're going to see the same thing. You're going to be worshiping the same way, but in a little bit of a different way. There's a definition that's come out recently that Anglicanism at its heart is both contesting and contextualizing the Christian faith, in the way that you can go anywhere in the world, and I've lived in Tanzania and Haiti. The liturgy structure is the same. It's going to be in different languages. I'm not going to understand exactly what's going on, but like I can tell you when the Nicene Creed is going to happen, when the Lord's Prayer happens, and it's like if you just sit and think about how powerful that this liturgy has been with us for hundreds and hundreds of years, and can be traced back to the early church, and that on a Sunday, the same thing is being said and finding meaning and depth in all of these different places and people. Like that's the gospel. Like that's the whole thing. Like that's why we're doing it. And yes, it happens in lots of different Christian traditions, but there's something uniquely fun about being an Episcopalian where you get to dance around all of that. When I talk about the history of the church, I bring in the musical Hamilton and Six, those two musicals where Hamilton, which everyone knows him now because of the musical, he was a faithful Episcopalian. He's buried at Trinity Church, Wall Street. And it has written about his faith and how it's informed who he became as a person. Like that's the kind of stuff I want to work with, of like people who deeply know who they are and are not afraid to be who they are, and accepted and loved within one church. And they're all together, come together on a Sunday, and they worship together, and they leave these doors, and maybe they have different opinions, but on that Sunday morning, they're together. Like that's the community of God right there.
One of the words that seems to come up when I've had conversations with you is intentional. Talk about that, would you please?
Yeah. So I think structure sometimes can feel rigid. Like we have a prescribed way that we do Sunday service. But I like to think about it as, yes, there is some rules around how we do things, but they're not done out of because I say so or because that's how we've always done it. There's deep theology and meaning behind what we do. And so what I like to say is in my job, I try to be intentional in all that I do. And if I'm not, call me out on it, because if I'm not being intentional, then I'm not following the love of God. Because the Gospels show us that every instance God takes time, even when it's moments when the woman reaches for the cloak of his garment just to be healed. It's not jump and yell at her for doing that. It's intentional. Like, she had so much faith that her reaching out and grabbing the hem of his garment is intentional and powerful, and he wants to honor that moment, even if it's not within the prescribed meaning. But then there are times, like for example, in my grief, that we say the Nicene Creed most every Sunday, and I was struggling with the part of the Nicene Creed that talks about resurrection, because I'm deep in my grief and deep in my sorrow, and my seminarian friends kind of look at me, and I was like, I don't know if I can say the Nicene Creed in this moment. Like, it's just, I don't know if I believe all of these things. And they look at me and they say, that's okay, we'll say it on your behalf. And that's the beauty of kind of confessing our sins together, to doing worship together, is in the moments when it's hard and maybe not true of our entire existence, we have people doing it on our behalf. We pray for the community in a prescribed way, because we're always praying for the nation. We're always praying for the people in our local communities. We're praying for the people that lead our church. And like, those are requirements of our structure, but it also, when those feel harder to do, we're doing it on behalf of those people that's harder to do for. And that's why I love the word intentional, that there's space in there, that when it's hard, to be able to sit in that hard and that feelings, but then also someone is doing it on your behalf.
Great. Every week, Father Henry in his announcements ends with, all are welcome. Talk about what that means to you.
One of the things that's really important about my formation is I actually was put on the vestry when I was 16 years old of my church, which is the church council, and they trusted a wily 16-year-old to do things, which I still am kind of dumbfounded by. And I sat in these meetings and was in charge of leading the church in this way. And one of those decisions we had to make was that we had to close our preschool that I'm an alumni of, and it was a very hard decision, because it was such a huge part of our identity. So many of our people went there, and I myself went there, and like, it was just painful. And then the gift of the Holy Spirit was that our junior warden or senior warden at the time was a former school administrator, and she goes, well, there's this 400 long wait list of students that are under the age of 5 who need preschool and are low income, but there's not enough space in the current public education system for them to get early childhood education, and they need that. And she's like, what if we turn our church preschool into a public preschool, because we have this building and the space, and like, through the gift of God, they got grants to update our building. So like, we ended up not paying what you normally would for a renovation of that size. And now this church has, it's predominantly a Spanish speaking population. And that was just not part of our church beforehand. And so now there's this intermixing of community and culture, because of something that was painful became this like way to blossom. And I think that is the countercultural way that Hendry always talks about of what it means to be a Christian today. When it's so easy to be divisive and separate, like, oh, well, we can't have a public school in a Christian church, like, that doesn't make sense. but it does make sense because God is meant for everyone and everything. And so when you put those two things that don't work, like that in the outside world don't work, and you put them together, like that's where the wonders of the Spirit come through. Like I could have never imagined that when we were making that painful decision, but now it's blossoming and growing, and people are being challenged and asked to just do something different, and it's wonderful, even with the pain that was originally there.
All right, great. Emily, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time today to share your story with us.
Thank you.